Welcome back, everybody, to a League of Inches podcast. My name is Joel, obviously your host, and I have got a brand new. Well, it's brand new everything at the moment. There's a brand new show. There's segments in the show. There's a brand new member of League of Inches, as you've seen with the rollout of getting to know us. And this is one of the new crew with us now, and that's Jason Polese. I've really emphasized trying to get this name right and really
Polese.
get
Polese.
Polese. So we'll get there soon, guys. So keep working with me. We will get by probably the 12th show we've got with him. I might have it down pat and just roll off the tongue. My troubles are I can't roll my R's, so I struggle with anything. So anything that involves a rolling of the R or some sort of tongue movement, I'm gone. So, but what we're doing today, guys, it's really exciting. I'm going to introduce Jason shortly, but we're going to start doing, as you know, from last time I had Jason on the show, his background, his workplace, it comes in a lot in handy for us. We can actually talk about some of the cases at the moment that are big in the NRL and talk about the sort of the legal proceedings with it and the backstories and see where things can come off. And we're going to start to do that a lot more. So anytime there's something that does pop up that's clearly in the media, so this isn't us trying to break stories or anything like that. We're talking about things that are clearly out in the media already being spoken about. And we'll just dig a bit deeper into things and actually explain it from both sides of the parties and just so hopefully everyone can understand actually what's going on, because it can get confusing. There's a lot of big words get thrown around that even confuse myself, and Jason's here to help us dumb it down a little bit. I know I need that, and then just simplify a little bit as well. So as I said, Jason's jumped on now. You remember him from ripping the Parramatta Eels a new one a few weeks ago. A lot of great feedback. So I've welcomed him onto the crew with welcome open arms. So it's great to have you on board, Jason. Really keen to see what we can do together moving forward. There's already a lot of big things happening behind the scenes that can't wait to start announcing a lot of it. There is one thing we can announce now though. What is that? There is a prize and a giveaway that is going to be featured on the show.
Yes. Joel will do a post about it, but as I've said before, I'm a hospitality corporate partner, and part of that is tickets to the Field Club. And the Field Club is basically it's the inner sanctum experience that CommBank has for the Parramatta Eels. You come in and you walk in through the corporate entrance where the players walk in. You go down to the field level. You pretty much walk past the sheds and you come out into a nice bar area and a seating area. And the field is literally right in front of you. So you can watch the game from the field level. That's why it's called the Field Club. And that's where you get your drinks and get your food. There's canapes. There's a buffet usually of some pretty cool stuff. The last couple of weeks has been kebabs, tacos. So it's been some decent food, and you always get the meat pies and sausage rolls at halftime and a dessert. And if you come with my package, you get an array of drinks that are included in the drinks package. So what I'm offering for Joel to put in as a prize is 2 tickets to the Field Club for the Parramatta Melbourne Storm game, which now off the top of my head I've forgotten which date it is.
We'll get to with the finer details in the post, guys. But yeah, look that up and you'll see that.
It's a great experience. It's a great way to watch the game. It's a lot of fun. You get to see all the media personalities. You get to see the boys run out in front of you, as well with the whole the pyrotechnics and the smoke and everything, and watch them run out. It's a really great experience. You can watch the coin toss as well. So it's really, really cool. And if you like Para or you like Melbourne or you just love footy, really, it's a really great experience for any footy lover. And you can wear, you can wear your colours if you're not a Parramatta or Melbourne supporter. You can turn up as with your Bunnies jersey if you really want.
Random South guy.
The random South guy. But it's a great experience, and I think everyone would enjoy it, and I hope and we wish the best of luck to those that enter into it to try and win that.
Yeah, I'm very, very appreciative of that one, Jason. I told you off here, I tell you on there how awesome it is. I can't wait to give that away. And as you said, it's an experience that I think so many footy fans will want to actually have to say that they've been involved with. It's so good, such a good prize. So really keen to get that one up over the next couple of days, guys. Keep an eye on the page, and you'll be able to enter there. Let's get into what we're talking about. So as you all know already, guys, so Jason is a practicing barrister, mediator, academic, and principal consultant at Advisory Pty Limited. Practices in commercial, corporate, employment, insolvency, property law, provides mediation and tutoring services and business consultancy services. He can be contacted via advisory.com.au, Advisory on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And there'll be a few links and stuff that I will post with not just that giveaway post, but with this podcast post when it does get announced. So just check that if you are interested in some of Jason's services. But we're going to talk about the two cases at the moment. Obviously, Lloyd Perrett with the Manly Sea Eagles, which hasn't actually gone to the courts yet. It is still trying to be decided outside of that. So there's not probably it's a bit different to talk about, but we'll let Jason explain that one a little bit more. And then also the Bulldogs case with Jackson Topine. So we'll have a little bit of a chat about that one as well. That's obviously into the courts side of things now. And just to tack both and hopefully explain to everyone out there a little bit more about both cases and what's actually going on. Let's dive into the Manly one first. Where to at the moment with Lloyd Perrett are we at, Jason?
I think Lloyd Perrett at the moment, I can't find any filing in court, and there's no reporting of any filings. So I think what I understand is that there's been a demand. So perhaps a letter of demand has been sent by Perrett's legal representatives to the Manly Club and potentially also to the NRL. And what's likely occurring at the moment is a bit of back and forth in correspondence and maybe potentially some settlement discussions about what Perrett wants and how much that is, and whether or not Manly and the NRL are willing to take on some sort of settlement, some sort of payout. So I think that's what's going on at the moment because it doesn't seem to be any filing in the courts. So as I understand it, is making a claim that he suffered a life-threatening seizure at training in 2017, which was due to the fact that they were in an intense training drill to do with, I believe, I think it was just a fitness drill, but the test was how long you could go without water. So from that, he's got some sort of heat stroke, and it's claiming that it was a seizure and life-threatening. So that's, I think, where it's at the moment.
Yeah, pretty serious, as we've seen. So what you're saying is there isn't a claim as of yet. So there isn't much details and there isn't much that can be reported. Is that correct? Because it hasn't got to that stage of proceedings?
Yes. So all we know really at the moment is what's being reported in the media.
He's actually said in an interview. Yeah.
Yes, he did do an interview with Wide Sports, and that's where most of the information has been taken from. Even when it comes to like Fox League and the others, most of it has been taken from this interview. Where he's divulged a fair amount of information. To be honest, he speaks about survivor guilt in relation to Keith Titmus's death. He thinks that, he says that his psychologist has diagnosed him with that condition because he suffered a similar injury and didn't die. So now he's got what's called survivor's guilt. And he also alleges that he's never been the same since, hasn't been able to play the same, hasn't been able to progress his career. And he says that he believes that other players, he was at a certain standard and he thinks he could have gone on to do good things. He even says that apparently Phil Gould approached him to go to Penrith. And the only reason why he's taking legal action is to let the world know that it's unacceptable, that it's a form of torture, apparently. He still gets angry about it today. and that he thought he had the right talent and he was the right type of person to be very successful. But for this training situation, this seizure that he had, and what's happened to his friend that's caused him a psychological injury.
So, just the survivor's guilt side of things, I personally, and I reckon there's so many people out there that probably haven't heard it used before. Can you go into that a little bit more into detail about what it actually is, and I guess how the courts actually look into that? Is that a common practice used, or a common phrase, I guess, used in the courtroom, if that's the right terminology?
It's not as common. As I understand it, it might be its own form of anxiety and depression, and that it's been triggered by a survivor's guilt, which is, I suffered the same injury as my friend. He died, but I didn't. So I've then, speaking from maybe perhaps what he would say in an argument would be that I then have suffered anxiety and depression or some sort of trauma, maybe PTSD. So I don't think the actual condition itself is called survivor's guilt, but it could be an onset or some sort of subset of anxiety, depression, or PTSD. And the way that it's a psychological injury, and psychological injuries are accepted in the courts. You need expert evidence. So a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist would have to give the diagnosis. They would have to give evidence in court and support their prognosis and diagnosis based on their own experience and their expertise. So these allegations at the moment are just allegations, but if he was to bring a claim, he would need somebody to go through the details of the science behind it and why they say that he has this condition and what exactly is. Has that been a result? Was that the cause of this training injury? This training injury, and was that the cause due to Keith Titmus's death as well? So there needs to be a causal link based on the psychologist's experience and their knowledge and expertise in anxiety, depression, or PTSD. Then he would open up himself to then be examined by say the Manly or the NRL clinical psychologist or psychiatrist who would do an assessment themselves. And usually the court will just take two opinions from experts and analyze that evidence and what evidence is admissible and make a decision on what they think has happened, whether it's been proven that there is that injury, that psychological injury. Has it been proven that that was the cause and was Manly responsible for that injury? So that's sort of the legal process when it comes down to this. Everyone throws it around this aspect of duty of care.
It's a process. You mentioned that word. It sounds like it, and it's just getting started in a way. Like the claim hasn't even been made yet, so it's sort of like it's impossible to put timeframes on these sorts of things. I understand that, but just in my own head, I'm trying to think about just how long this is actually going to take. Like this process is going to be huge, I feel like, because it's not just it's obviously you look at the human element of this. You look at the fact it's a professional sport, which always gets increased media coverage. It won't just be sports outlets either that will be over this if it does get to that stage. It will be pretty much any media outlet, I think, in Australia and possibly the world keeping an eye on this sort of a thing, because this can open up a huge Pandora's box, I believe, in professional sport moving forward and potentially in the past if things like this can get triggered. Like, if I'm correct in thinking, I believe this was about 5 years ago now. This was done. So, like, you just think about all the story. Like, there's been stories. I remember listening to some podcasts and that where players and that, like, past players have been open with someone like the in quotation mark the torture sessions that they've been a part of and what they've gone through and stuff. So you just straight away, as soon as I heard this the other week when it came out, I straight away thought, holy shit, like this is actually huge for the game. And I know NRL 360 sort of came out very strongly, not really about this case, but more on the case we'll talk about shortly with Jackson, about how firm the NRL had to be on things. I'm just curious about your point of view of not just the game's point of view and if they have to be strong on it, but where this opens up to when it comes to players, when it comes to the sports element side of things, the trainers, the coaches, because you've got to be hard to be a professional athlete. Like, it has to be hard, otherwise everyone would do it. There's so many people out there that aren't cut out for being a professional athlete. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you make a good point in relation to it being 5 years. Lloyd Perrett may have a limitation issue. So depending on when this psychological injury occurs, he may be out of time. Now, he could be subjected to an application to the court to extend that time. So the usual period for any personal injury is 3 years. That's the usual period, and there's some exceptions and things. So he may already be on the back foot on an uphill battle, depending on when they actually allege that the injury was sustained. So that's a very important point, and maybe why they haven't filed proceedings just yet. But in the sense of how it affects NRL, but even sport at large, and it's been communicated through the media, and a lot of the media personalities that were ex-players that have said, this is the game. This is how you prepare for games. This is how you prepare for your team. If you're not willing to be the tough, hardened, super fit player who can back their teammates, support the team, be there in the tough times when you're down in the rain, whatever it is, get to a grand final and you're buggered and you can't breathe, but you have to just keep going. This is elite sport, and if you can't do that, then why are you attempting to become an elite sports person? It just doesn't make sense. And a lot of that sentiment has been conveyed through the media, through a lot of ex-players, where even some players have said the benefits far outweigh the detriments in training and the risk that the players take because someone mentioned that they're spoiled. That players are spoiled. They have access to doctors and physios and all this sort of thing. I think it was mentioned on NRL 360 that the players are well looked after. So these type of situations, even though they may occur or they may be rare, if the benefits of being a professional elite sports person, it far outweighs these type of risks. So overall, the impact would depend really, because the only other real similar cases that have gone to the courts have been injuries during play, as I understand it. Mm-hmm. So there are some cases from the last 20 years. One is Green in Australian Rugby League football from 2003 that went to the Supreme Court, and it was about a hooker that was in a collapsed scrum and broke his neck. And there was an assessment by the court in that instance on whether or not that person was suitable for the position and how much of the suitability into playing the sport and being in that position went to their own personal factors. So Mr. Green, who was the hooker, there was an assessment by the court of how much they should have known about their capabilities and whether or not they should have continued in that position. So I think that's important aspect of this case and cases overall, that of course there is a huge risk of floodgates, which we refer to in the legal profession, opening the floodgates to a lot of claims. But really, the way that the courts assess these type of things is not as cut and dry as everyone thinks, where you've suffered an injury, there is a duty of care, so you've been injured, so you can just make a claim. Well, it's not really like that. There is a very serious process that the court goes through and a serious assessment, and some of that assessment, from what I understand from the authorities, the precedent cases, is that the court looks at what's called contributory negligence or mitigating factors of the person themselves. So, for instance, for Lloyd Perrett, it's a situation where he actually says in his interview that he was told that he could leave. So he had the opportunity to leave training and stop. He wasn't, for instance, there wasn't a gun being held to his head. He wasn't being forced to do this. It was part of normal fitness training. It wasn't disciplinary. He got a heat stroke from lack of water because he says water wasn't given to him. But to what extent he could have got access to water, we don't know. So it's also discussed as well by people in the media about his level of fitness. Maybe he wasn't fit enough. Maybe he was overweight. Maybe there was a lack of preparation. So as I understand, the players actually know how to prepare and are told properly how to prepare for training. So for instance, what they need to eat, how much level of preparation before that date to do the certain types of training. So it's not usually a deep end type thing. It's a work your way up to a certain fitness level. And that might not be 100% accurate, but that's what's portrayed in the media. And on top of that, Perrett apparently finds out that he had poor liver and kidney and thyroid markers from his blood test subsequently. So what happened was, after the incident, Manly then put him on with a specialised doctor and a specialised group to look after him and make sure this didn't happen again. So this instance, I think from Manly's point of view, there might be a claim and there may be a breach of the duty of care. But what's also taken into consideration is what Mr. Perrett did to contribute to it. And then following that, has Manly mitigated or tried to mitigate the loss or the injury? So have they tried to help him to reduce the impact of the injury? And maybe they have in this instance. So it's a very interesting case. There's a lot of factors that go to it. But overall, I don't think this is probably a very special one. I don't think this would be used by anyone else in the future. But the Jackson Topine one, I think, is more concerning in the way that it's occurred.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to start to move towards that case, because there's a few more questions I have, but it can get covered, and it's pretty much questions that can relate to this case as well. So I'd rather ask it while we're discussing this case as well. So you've spoken about Jackson Topine, the Topine, however people want to pronounce it. So we do know a lot more in this case. So first of all, $4 million proceedings. It's in the Supreme Court of New South Wales already. So it's an open case. It's currently happening, and it's put down. What do you know so far about this case?
What I can see so far is that there has been proceedings filed, and it's worth $4 million. At the moment, I'm not entirely sure where the proceedings are at. It may be another situation of the parties trying to settle the proceedings before it goes any further. So it could be a situation where they've filed, served, or maybe they haven't even served yet. I'm not sure. But the NRL and maybe Bulldogs have got on top of it and trying to resolve it. But it is a $4 million suit claiming psychiatric injury and physical and mental impairment because of a training incident. So this is not like Perrett's case where there was an injury per se from the training. This is phrased as an incident, and because of the incident, and the incident is, as we all know, that's been said in the media, is he was late to training and he was told that he had to wrestle 30 or 35 players back-to-back non-stop. The reason why that was the punishment for being late was because that day they were doing wrestling. So it's also been said in the media that if that day they were doing the beat test, then he would have had to run forever, or if they were doing push-ups, it would have been 1,000 push-ups. It just so happens that day they were doing wrestling, and he had to wrestle 30 or 35 players. And because of that, he then says that he suffered a psychiatric injury, deprivation of his liberty, humiliation, indignity, physical exhaustion, physical discomfort, anxiety, and embarrassment and fear. And because of that, he's been unable to then progress his rugby league career. So that's the essence of the claim. The Bulldogs board have come out straight away and said they will vigorously defend it. But I guess that's probably a good standpoint in the public eye, where maybe in the background they are trying to resolve it quicker rather than later.
With this case, the one thing for mine that I think a lot of people need to be very careful with, and again, I resort back to NRL 360, which I love watching that show, but I noticed when they were talking about this case, a couple of the panel members were very, very stern in their wording around this, and just how much the NRL needs to be involved purely off the fact to protect the club. It doesn't feel like there's been much talk so far about protecting Jackson or other players or current players, past players, etc., which I feel like is a dangerous sort of territory to get in, especially to a program that's so heavily watched. To be so what it appeared one-sided in their argument, I thought was a bit of some dangerous territory. So what I wanted to try and cover a little bit here is, yes, I think the game needs to be involved, but I think the game needs to be involved to protect not the game, but protect the players. Because if this has been happening for this long, and I know people will be sitting there listening to us going, well, this is how it used to happen in my day. We used to have to smack blokes for 60 minutes, blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, okay, we all know that. Where no one is disputing how tough the game is or how it was done back in the day. But what everyone is starting to realize now is that 2024 is a whole different beast, and it's only going to get more extreme, I guess, in that side of things. So, yeah, I think the NRL needs to be involved, but I think the NRL needs to be involved to protect the playing group more than the clubs as well. Where is it sort of there with you in terms of it's hard for the NRL because I got no doubt they need to be involved, but what side of the fence do they have to sit on?
Well, it's a good point you make because as much as we want to stop the floodgates, at the same time, there is a player who's been affected by the situation. So there are rumours, like you said, of NRL 360 that go around where players are actually upset by this, and they don't think that there should be a legal proceeding about it. But I think what was said well, and there was a very heated argument. I think last week or the week before. On the panel at 360 where Benny Elias and Jeff Tuvey came on. And both Benny Elias and Jeff Tuvey were actually quite pragmatic and objective in the situation, saying, well, despite the fact that, it used to be tough and we used to be, hard asses and do the hard yards, these days the law is different. There is a duty of care at work. There's occupational, what's called workplace health and safety. And the NRL and the teams and clubs are workplaces, and you have to abide by certain rules, and there's definitely a duty of care. So that was a refreshing point of view because most of the other panel were just very against Jackson Topine and his proceedings, and you can take your own views on that and take your own. You think maybe it's just part of being an elite player, which it could certainly be. But I think the distinction is that this was as a disciplinary process. So if you make an analogy, to let's say you're late to work and you work at a restaurant, to what extent can your employer punish you for being late? So it may be reasonable or unreasonable to give a written warning, give a verbal warning, ask you to leave. So you don't start your shift. So there's certain things that are reasonable that the employer can do in that situation. What may be unreasonable would be to cancel all your future shifts, fire you, or say in front of everyone, why the F are you always late? You're such a lazy, so and so. So this is what we're dealing with Jackson Topine's case. I don't think it's so much about the training and a training injury, which was like with Lloyd Perrett. It's more focused around the disciplinary action. So was it reasonable in those circumstances? Now, if the NRL and the Bulldogs can prove that this is what they usually do, and this is the culture, so there is many cases in employment law which suggest that if the culture creates its own procedures and policies, and the culture creates some sort of expectation, and the employee accepts it by what's called acquiescence, which you don't do anything about it and you just accept it and you go along with it because you know it's what you have to do in order to be part of the team or to have that employment. And the adage or analogy is, it may not say in your contract that you must work 8:30 to 6:30, but everyone does it. Every single person across the board in the company works from 8:30 to 6:30. And even though your contract says 9 to 5, you'd be expected to work 8:30 to 6:30. And the company could potentially enforce that against you as a policy or a procedure as part of workplace culture. So let's say, for instance, this has happened before to somebody else, or over the course of time, he's been told, if you're late, you'll be punished with, some sort of training, some sort of excessive running or push-ups or whatever it is. And he knows that if he's late, he'll be subjected to that type of disciplinary action. Then maybe there's a strong case for that. He's done nothing about it. He's accepted it, and therefore it forms part of his employment. The other side of it, as I said, is that duty of care. To what extent was it reasonable? And in this situation as well, it's not just an employment matter. It does also go to that duty of care negligence. So maybe there was a stage, what may be argued is maybe there was a stage where he wouldn't have suffered a psychiatric injury, say at 15 players, for instance, or 10 players that he wrestled. And that was reasonable to teach him a lesson for not being late, for being late, and to not be late again. Now, was it excessive to have him wrestle 30 or 35 players, and did that cause the injury, and when did injury occur? This is all expert evidence that the court will require, and they have to go through that same process using psychologists or psychiatrists to go through that. And I'd assuming as well the NRL would probably bring their own experts in relation to elite training and what's required in elite training. And is this a common occurrence, or is something like this, maybe the NRL will the Bulldogs may frame this as a training exercise to see how much fitness you have. How long can you make tackles for? Can you make 30 tackles back to back? So there's a lot of arguments here or there. We won't know where everything goes until they finish their evidence and it goes to court and finish the arguments. But these are the type of things I'm seeing that can happen in this case from both sides of things. And certainly there's definitely a level of concern for players. So really what should happen, in my personal view, is the NRL should conduct an investigation, which apparently Jackson Topine has refused to be part of. But they can do an overall objective investigation into Bulldogs, into Manly, or into all the clubs, and let's see what can be put into place to not just ensure that the players are at elite level, but so these type of things don't happen again. And I think that's the most important part out of this for the NRL, is making sure that, just like they've done with concussion and putting in concussion protocols, maybe they can put into place some codes of conduct about the extent of training and what needs to be done, but at the same time balancing that there is that need for elite level people that have to be at the top 0.01% of fitness and strength and capabilities for their position or for their team.
With this case, I'm all we've heard so far is about basically Jackson suing, in the simple terms of things, the club, as in the Bulldogs. Is there a leg to stand on in this case? Like the way, like I'm quickly thinking out loud here, and there could be people trying to think of questions that people are thinking of at the time. Why is it the club that's getting sued? Why isn't it, say, the trainer or is the coach at the time who was there to instruct that? Because I guess the club could probably go back to him and say, mate, we're sitting up there in our big building and in our leagues club. We had no idea what was going on at the time. We might have said A, B, and C to say the trainer or to the coach there at the time, and they're supposed to stick to this, but they've obviously gone off and done X, Y, Z, which shouldn't have happened. I know that it's in the courts at the moment, it's in the Supreme Courts with this, and it's the club that's involved. But is there a way that this can get turned around onto either the head coach at the time or the trainer at the time?
Certainly. And it's a great question. I'll explain that. So first of all, from a practical point of view, it's always best in the public eye to support employees. But what it is, it's as many people will know, but not know the actual legal name. It's called vicarious liability. So anything that you do in the scope of your employment as an employee for your employer is what's called imputed or passed on to that employer. And it's referred to as vicarious liability. So the employer is vicariously liable for anything that the employee does within the scope of their employment. So if the situation is that the club has said something and the trainers do what the club have said, then the trainers can't be sued personally. But if the club has told them to do something and then they've acted outside of that, and it can be argued, or the club wants to potentially cross-claim against them, so they would make a separate claim and say that the trainer acted outside of the scope of their duties or acted outside of instructions, then potentially the trainer may become personally liable. There are other little circumstances here or there. So maybe if the trainer physically assaults somebody, if there's a criminal element, they may be, of course, personally liable for that as well. But it's to the extent of whether or not they act outside the scope of their employment. So at the moment, as I understand it, the club is not claiming that this training was outside of the normal training that they do, or outside of the normal thing that they would usually do. So that implies that the trainers were acting within the scope of their employment. And what I haven't seen the documents, but what I assume is that depending on the contract for the player, there'll be several parties involved. So there'll be the Bulldogs and how they structure the Bulldogs club. There will likely be New South Wales Rugby League. There will likely be National Rugby League, and potentially other entities that are involved in the running of those as well. So there could be another 5 or 6 defendants that the player is claiming owed them a duty of care at the time through the proximity. So because they were part of the club, or because they were training through some sort of training company or whatever it was. So there could be a third party there that's like maybe that they've come to the club to help with training, but also the way that the clubs structure things. So the contracts, more often than not, because if you play the New South Wales Cup, you're actually a player of the New South Wales Rugby League, and whether or not you're in the top 30, then that says that you're a part of NRL. And there's a way that it just depends on the contract that Jackson Topine had at the time, and then who his lawyers think were also liable because they were connected to the training or to the club in some way and owed Jackson a duty of care.
Final question, because we do need to start wrapping things up for this chat. I'm loving it. And guys, if you are enjoying this sort of content, please let us know afterwards as well in the comments as you're listening. We can talk, do a bit more of these sorts of podcasts. I said, whenever something comes up in the NRL, the rugby league circle around this side of things, we'll be doing a podcast. But if you want some other stuff, throw it at us. We're always open to some ideas. At the moment, it's $4 million. And I'm guessing that $4 million is, I think Jackson's saying in 10 years, he's missed out on his career and averaged it out at $400,000 a year. To me, I feel like that's pretty bare minimum stuff in terms of when you think about it. He's be missing out on, say, sponsorship deals potentially. He could be missing out on third-party deals. He could be missing out on rep football money as well. Is the $4 million the roundabout figure in your mind pretty exact, or is there sort of room to move there? Like, is there a chance it could open up more in the courts? Like, it just, to me, when I look at it and I think if this case is going to go forward to become this full-blown court case, it's in the courts for, by how it looks, it's going to be in the courts for potentially years, how big it's going to be. I don't know. I think $4 million in a way has shortchanged himself, as crazy as that sounds.
Well, I think My suggestion would be, from my own experience, is that lawyers will often put the maximum possible that the person can claim. So what usually they have to do is when they file a claim like this, they have to sign off on reasonable prospects of success. So they have to say that the case has merit, and that includes the damages that are being claimed. So more often than not, lawyers will make an assessment, and it's usually the maximum they think is possible. It's unlikely that they'll put a more, I guess, careful or conservative figure. It's more likely that it's on the higher end, and that's probably because they've done an assessment on the injury itself, the time frame for a normal NRL career, how much they could have made, from a progression type thing, so on a scale or a curve. So there's been some sort of calculation, but I'd suggest that it's probably the maximum they think he can claim. Now that'll go up. Let's say, for instance, the court accepts the $4 million. That'll go up with interest as well. There'll be interest under court rates applied, and also legal costs applied as well if he's wholly successful. So that amount will technically go up. But in terms of what he would get, that's probably the maximum I think that he would get. And it's doubtful. I mean, you don't know, because then the evidence could extract more information that suggests that the amount should go up, and then they would amend their claim and up the amount. But at the moment, that's probably the maximum that he's claiming.
Last one for you. So both cases, as we're recording this podcast on a Wednesday night, hasn't gone to the courts. One hasn't even been launched as a potential case either. What's your personal belief about the chances of both of these cases being sorted either before the courts or actually making it to the courtrooms?
Well, it's an interesting one, because I think Perrett has its own legal complications, so that might be still being sorted out. So I think that will settle. I don't think that'll be filed, because the Jackson Topine case has already been filed. This is a big decision for, I think, the NRL, who will likely back the Bulldogs and likely fund it and fund the litigation, because this can go either way. This can be a precedent set that every time you file proceedings, the NRL will just settle, and that's not something that most employers want as a precedent. They don't want people to think they can just make any claim they feel like and they'll get something out of it. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is that if they do run it, because they want to make a point that you can't just make any claim you want, and they lose, that precedent would be huge. That impact on rugby league, and I think I said before, at sport at large, could be massive. It could be massive. So there needs to be, hopefully the NRL is getting some great legal advice from more experienced people than me, looking at the situation properly and giving advice about whether or not they should put all their resources into fighting it and defending it and running the risk of an adverse judgment. Because at the end of the day, despite how much evidence you put on and how well prepared you are, the decision can go against you. And that would be huge for the NRL. So they need to see whether or not they should do that, or if they should put all their effort into resolving the case and then in the public eye saying, we're going to do everything we can to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I think the latter is the more important, because proceedings, there's no guarantee in legal proceedings. It's going to cost them a lot of money. It's for the time that it runs, for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, it's going to be in the public eye constantly. So in my personal view, I think they should be looking at resolving it and mitigating the situation as soon as possible. But there is certainly an argument in support of the NRL and the Bulldogs to say, nah, we're not going to just accept $4 million claims whenever somebody is upset because they had to do some extra hard yards because they were late, and we're going to run this to the end. Because there is that aspect of the courts that will do a very rough assessment, in terms of rough, I mean, they really look into it properly and look at the player themselves as well, what they have done, because it is elite sport and you need to be at an elite level. And there's often the adage as well that the courts don't like to get involved with sport and the associations in relation to sport on these issues. And that was seen through the recent Fair Work case that went to the federal court with Jack DeBellin. The court basically, as part of its decision, said we'll leave those type of decisions to the NRL because they're the best to make decisions about their sport and the effect on their sport and how their employees affect the sport. So there's that adage as well, where maybe the courts will not be too keen to make a decision that would affect the whole of sport.
I've loved it. I have loved this chat. One thing I know for certain is sporting clubs, not just in Australia but around the world, will be watching both of these cases already closely. I feel like it's potentially huge. We've said it a number of times already this podcast, but don't underestimate just how big of an impact this can potentially have on the sporting landscape as a whole moving forward. It's quite scary. Not trying to pick either sides here at all, because I can see both parties where it's coming from. I understand punishments need to happen to players when things aren't met, when you're a professional athlete, certain criteria is not met, you should be putting that, but also can understand these days you need to have that duty of care as well. But Jason, I've loved having you on here. Guys, as I said, you're not going to miss out on hearing his voice anytime soon. He'll be featuring on many, many podcasts to come, many posts, but really appreciate your time on here. Again, guys, if you need to reach out for any situations at all, please reach out to Jason on xvisor.com.au or find him on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. But Jason, any final words before I sign off?
Up, Para.
had to get that one into it. Sorry, guys, another podcast where Para's mentioned.
No, I think it's great to have these discussions and the impact of the law on the NRL, and I hope that people have. I hope that what we've discussed has assisted people in understanding what's going on. And if you've got comments and questions, feel free. I mean, I'm more than happy to do another one that's just answering questions and comments as well. People that might have questions about these cases or similar cases or how the law works in these situations. So please feel free, comment, like, subscribe, etc., etc. We love discussing footy, and I love discussing footy and the law. So this is great for me. So thanks very much, Joel. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope this helps.
Yeah. I forgot to say it at the start of the show, but guys, that the name for this podcast is going to be LOI Order. So LOI, a little bit of a play, but that'll be what it is under. So guys, Jason is 100% right. Please let us know any feedback at all, any questions or whatsoever. Please comment on either the video. There's a podcast link. Just give us a direct message on Facebook, Instagram, whatever social media platform you have as well. More than happy to go into anything that you would like us to, if this is of interest to you. So thank you for your time. Thanks to Jason. As he said, please like, subscribe, all that jazz. Become a Facebook subby. It does go a long way of helping support the page. But bye for now.